And we'll start with Manuel from the Overseas Development Institute, who will be telling us about experimenting with innovative funding in the justice sector, or more broadly. But
thank you.
Many thanks.
Okay, I wish it was just the justice sector. No, the idea was it had to be global, it had to be all sectors, and it had to be in 10 minutes. So, anyway, thank you. So, what I want to do is just touch on two sources of ideas around innovation. One very much a policy one, and very much a practice one. I hope that helps sort of gets people thinking. And then finally, as I've been asked in my speaker's brief, set out what some of the what that might actually mean in terms of what donors do differently. So that's what I'll be trying to do in 10 minutes. So the first of all, in terms of the policy thinking, in terms of global aid and thinking about how to make aid the most efficient and funding for development the most efficient, the most recent major event, as some of you may know, but I suspect not all of you will know, was the New Deal that was agreed in Busan at the end of 2011. And this was designed to reflect everyone's collective understanding how best to engage in fragile states. But the lessons, I think, are particularly applicable in the justice sector. So at this agreement, all the donors that you can think of signed up, including 33 UN agencies and almost every single fragile state that you can name as well. So it's got a lot of collective buy-in behind it. And out of that came 10 principles with two snappy acronyms. The first one was called Focus, the second one was called Trust. And I want to just talk about those two. So the first one, Focus. So in that, the O of Focus stood for the need to have one plan. Now, in the justice sector, that particularly resonates. There's a lot of work around suggesting that the need to take a coherent view, a holistic view, a multi-layered view, a multi-institutional view is being drummed in from everything that we've learnt about the sector. So having one sort of plan that echoes around that makes a lot of sense. It ties in with some of the latest political economy thinking that's been going on. So the how can aid be used to overcome service delivery constraints, a paper written by my colleagues here, identified the need for coherence as being absolutely critical if you're going to make progress around this. It's not merely one plan, it's one country-led plan. And again, the importance of countries taking ownership is well recognised and has been well recognised in this sector. I think one of the best snappy, what do we need to do in the justice sector? Countries need to take charge was its first point, and that was a review written over 15 years ago. So the need for having one plan. So good idea. Some various countries were interviewed at one of the evaluations of the justice sector. One country said, we have no plan. Okay, fine, we can start to work there. Another one said, we have a great plan, but it was written by academics who had no linkage whatsoever to either the ministry or the budget, so they don't own it and aren't intending to do anything with it. I think we've been there before. And the best quote of all was that we have many plans, all of them are imaginative and imaginary. Which I thought was just great. A total recognition that you can produce plans that have no validity whatsoever. So the need for a plan, the need to take a coherent approach to a plan, that needs to be a key part, it seems to me, of any of the financing models that of donors seeking to engage in the justice sector, but it is not easy. The second aspect was on the trust principles, and there were two aspects that stood out of that. The R stands for risk. And basically people were saying in fragile states, people aren't taking enough risk, and I think we've heard this before. And again, as I've heard this said about the justice sector, donors need to take more risks. They need to avoid just doing the safe stuff, working with human rights commissions and NGOs. Again, another review of the sector a while ago. They also need to, and then the U under trust stands for the use of country systems, where again, the recognition is that if you want to have sustainable change, you need to be involved in the government systems themselves. So you need to be maximising the use of government systems in the process. And that is where we hit one of the challenges. So how do you actually do that? Now, a recent DFID review of work in fragile states again made the same point. You need to move from a risk avoidance strategy to a risk management strategy. Again, fine policy words, said at an international community, but how do we actually do that in practice? And that's what I want to come up with now. So that's, if you like, the New Deal, a bit of a policy framework. There are many more ideas than that, which if you want to mine, you might want to do so. So what do we do about the practice? Now, one of the weird things is we wrote a paper ahead of Busan entitled Innovative Financing. I also then read a DFID review about innovative financing models, and they recommended the Afghanistan Reconstruction Trust Fund. Now, some of you may never have heard of it, some of you will know it very well, but one of the startling features about this isn't actually new. This was created in 2000. What is the real tragedy is that actually very, very few other countries have copied it to date. And its lessons are still being applied, and DFID is still encouraging its countries' offices to think about, yes, you should look at this. This is a really good example. What was new about it, and why people still interested in it, is at the centre of it is this idea of reimbursable financing. So what the government did was they wanted to pay police salaries in Afghanistan. They were very aware of the high corruption risk associated with that. So they said to the government, right, we will pay for police salaries, but under this process. You will pay the police salaries in the month, and then we will go and send in a monitoring agent to evaluate and to check whether those police salaries are being paid. If we find it's all fine, we'll recommend to the donors they give you 100% reimbursement of what you've taken. If they say, actually, we can't trace 25% of the people who were apparently paid out of this, we'll give you 25% less than the full amount. The point about the reimbursable process, it changes the way risk is being managed. So the initial risk falls on the government to do as best as it can to make sure its systems are working as well as possible. But if the procurement systems aren't working properly, the donors have the right to say, we'll automatically, no questions, not a big song and dance, we'll just reduce the amount of money we're going to give to you. And if you can get it up to 85% the next time, we'll give you a bit more next time. So a real alignment of incentives to improve financial management, a real interesting way of managing risk. The interesting thing about it is some of you may know USAID have come up with a new instrument that they are working with called the FARA instrument, which stands for Fixed Agreement for Reimbursable Amounts. And this is precisely, in fact, the Afghanistan Reconstruction Trust Fund reconfigured as an instrument. Now, why does this help us? And this is why I wanted to bring up just one slide. This is a comparison of various funding options that people have if they're looking at justice. So, I don't know where Stan on this. These multi-screen rooms. I need a hologram. Okay, so let's work on this one. So, on the far left-hand side, you can see Rwanda Justice. The Rwanda Justice system is very simple. It is sector budget support. So we know about sector budget supports. It means it can cover all kinds of spending. The manager of it is the government. The signature, the location of the management is all within government. The signature is the government. The finance system that's used is the government. And implementation is all done by government. So if you're into using country systems, this gives you the gold star, and you think, great. And I'm sure lots of people around the room would think, yes, if only I could provide sector budget support to the justice sector and my country, my life would be a lot easier. The reality is often we're actually stuck in this right-hand column, which is the donor project approach. The donor project, subcontracted to a consultant approach, where it's done as a bilateral, so it's often a single donor. The spending tends to be limited to development, so sort of buildings and capacity building. The manager of it all is done by the consulting firm, private firm. The location is often a private firm's office. The signatory is all done by the private office. They're taking responsibility for it. The finance system is entirely the one created by the international accounting firm, or whoever's actually doing it. And the implementation is all done by that. So again, if you're thinking, actually we all know we should be using country systems, this is about as close to zero as you can get. And one of the problems, one of the things that I suppose I want to say to you is, it is not an either-or choice. It's not project or budget support. There are a range of things in the middle. So if you actually look at the far left, the next one is Uganda Justice, which is a basket pooled, which has been working for about 10 years. But it's very much located in the government, very much managed by government, the secretariat's inside the government, and the government systems are being used to actually pay it. If you look at the donor one and think, actually, well, we can pool money. So this is a Liberia Justice pooled fund, which is run by a nameless Yes, let me not be too critical even on Chatham House rules. But anyway, so they have it, they can do development spending, but they do manage it all themselves. So their manager is there, location is in their office, they sign all off on it, the finance system is theirs, the implementation is theirs. This is an example of the ultimate failed project, in so much as it had 5 donors, it now has 1, and that one is exiting, and they've all decided that they need a new pooled fund. So nice attempt, but really, really didn't work. What there is, however, is in the middle, and these are the 2 that we highlighted in the innovative aid instruments for the Busan conference. First one is the Afghanistan one, which I've already talked about, where you can see, you have pooled funding. It can do it does recurrent funding. It funded salaries as well as equipment. The manager was the donor, but a lot of the location, they were inside the government. There was joint signatory processes, and because of this reimbursement agreement, you actually were able to use for part of it government systems. Now, the other one that people talk a lot about is a DFID funded one, which is a DFID created one, the Liberia Health Pooled Fund. Quite similar, with the only real difference is it's got the reimbursement approach, but the big difference is it hasn't got a donor as the manager. It's got a private sector firm just doing the management. Now, there are many other examples around. The Basic Services Fund in South Sudan is another one that's often cited that works very well. Why is this useful? Because making fund management is very difficult. Liberia Pooled Health Fund has sacked 2 program managers in the course of 8 years. With all the other pooled funds, it's very, very difficult to sack anyone. And as a result, you get stuck with whoever you're left with. So you end up just having to close things down. So, New Deal gives you some policy ideas. I hope that gives you funding ideas actually as a range of options. It isn't just a project budget support options. So what does that mean for where we go from here? I think there are three things for donor into the donor community. First of all, I think there are things where you can scale up things that work. And the World Development Report background paper highlighted them. Many other people know about them. Pretrial detention is a very good investment, very high return, works very well, creates budget savings, reduces abuses. It's rather like the immunisation, it seems to me, of the justice world. You just need to carry on doing it and keep doing it. Paralegals, seems to me they're very much the primary healthcare workers of the justice sector. They work very well. You need to get them out there. They start to provide some accountability. They start to provide some service. They could be funded a lot more where they could be doing. So there are various options, and I've only mentioned 2. There are at least 10 or 12 that have been identified of things you just need to carry on financing, working out what's the best way of doing it, trying to do it according to the best possible ways of doing it. Second thing, I think what we've heard today and what we know is the heart of the challenge of justice sector's issue around accountability and impunity. If you create a good justice system that merely reinforces the oppressive nature of the regime, we're actually doing harm, not good. So it seems to me that what we heard today, some combination of the 4 people sitting here turned into a justice thing, might be really quite interesting as a way of tackling some of the justice problems and also tackling the issue of the poor Minister of Justice being rather lonely because no one ever comes to talk to him or support her. And finally, I actually think there's a need for a rethink. And I think the other lesson I would draw attention to is the Global Health Fund, which actually has a curious ability to work much better than I think any of us thought it originally would do. And I think there is a case for having a Global Justice Fund because I think the risks are very, very high working in the sector. I think having an arm's length process would actually help. I also think having an institution that was really dedicated working to it would help. If UNDP were to reform their system of human resource management and to transform itself into this wonderful organisation we long for it to be, I would suggest the UNDP does it. In the current state, I wouldn't, which is why I think we may well need an alternative for the pro tem. Hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcus.